Yeah, hi Sophie.
Hello,
Thanks
Raja.
for accepting to be in this conversation or dialogue. And I want you to introduce yourself uh, to the audience about who you are, what do you do, and what you are passionate
Mm. Well, thank you for being here. It's lovely. So, my name is Sophie Stephenson. I live in the Peak District in the UK. I've been working solely in a thinking environment now for about 15 years. So, I'm a member of the global faculty, and all of my work is in some way involved in the thinking environment. Like you, I've got a particular interest in children and education. So, whilst my background is in business, um, I'm have a real interest in like how do we raise thinkers? How do we enable people to live their lives without the presence of untrue and limiting assumptions and really being able to think for themselves. And I think increasingly that's important. The world needs people who are able to think for themselves. And so, most of my work is teaching and qualifying people in the thinking environment, but I also, am very much interested in how we integrate the thinking environment into our lives and work.
Thanks, Sophie. So, what I want you to do is probably I will ask the question for the dialogue, but I want you to introduce what is dialogue and how is it done in a thinking environment. Yeah.
Okay. So dialogue in a thinking environment is slightly different to what we would see as dialogue in normal life. So in normal life, you're having a conversation and we're exchanging ideas. So I say something, you respond. I say something else. It's a little bit like a game of tennis. There's an idea or a thought, and it gets batted back between the two of us. But one of the challenges in that kind of exchange is that both of us are listening in order to reply to each other. And so there's quite a lot of our attention is on what we're about to say. I think the key difference in dialogue in a thinking environment is it's not two people who are talking at each other or exchanging ideas. It's two people who are thinking together. And so when you're speaking, what I'm doing is giving all of my attention to you. So I'm really focusing on what you're saying, where your thoughts are going, how far you can go, really trying to listen in order to ignite a wave of thinking for you. And then when you're done with a wave of thinking, you'll invite me back in.
Mm.
And at that moment, I can go, well, now what do I think? So, not what did I think before you started speaking, but what do I think now because I've heard you speak and because I've heard your ideas? And so I think of dialogue and I think it's this beautiful weaving of ideas. And the joy is neither of us will know where it's going to go because it's something will emerge, that's different to if either one of us was just thinking on our own or if we were just exchanging. And so it is a real place of discovery and uncertainty, because it's alive, it's kind of emerging and it's full of possibility. So yeah, it's a beautiful kind of exploration of thinking. Yeah. Was there anything you wanted to add in from your experience, Raja?
Yeah. So I think one thing you said, I think, is the extremely important thing, especially in a dialogue, till the other person completes. I am not thinking about my response. I think it's a very, very critical thing which makes the dialogue very, very different here. But also, as you said, since I'm not thinking about the content, the ambiguity that I have to deal with is also a very interesting experience.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I totally agree.
yeah. Which is why it's so fun. I think, um, but it's also, I think, why in organizations or teams, often people will not use dialogue. So they'll use rounds or they use pairs because it feels safer.
Mm,
Whereas dialogue is this, it's like a living, breathing
mm,
thing,
mm.
where we don't know where it's going to go. Which is why, I think for those of us who practice it, it's actually, it can take our thinking further
Mm.
than if either of us was just on our own,
Yeah.
because we're using each other's waves of thinking to generate new ideas that we haven't wouldn't have had if we were thinking on our own.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. So now what we are going to do, as we discussed, we are going to have the dialogue on the component of appreciation. And I realize that both of us seem to love this component. So let's see where it goes. So the question that we will work with is, why does appreciation matter?
Mm.
What do you think?
Good question, isn't it? So I suppose in the context of the thinking environment, so the definition is noticing what is good and saying it. So noticing what other people are doing well. But the reason it matters is because we think better in an environment which is imbued with appreciation. So where we're valued for who we are, our brains are kind of then primed to be able to think about more challenging things. And so I think that's why it matters, is because if we want to think about hard and challenging things, we need appreciation. And I think often people think it's just like a nice to have. It's like, oh, if I get round to it, I'll appreciate you. But actually, if I'm in an environment with you and we need to think about something different, if you don't feel appreciated, your ability to think about whatever we're thinking about will be lessened. Because appreciation primes our brains with all of the kind of like the good hormone, the good juice to kind of get it going. And yeah, if you think about most of our school systems, most of our business environments, they're almost the opposite. So we have like this need for being critical, or this need to point out what's wrong, or to we're kind of prized on that. And so I think it's like it matters because we need it in order to think well and for us to thrive. Yeah, what do you think? I've got loads I could go on Friday.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about times when I know by the way the person looks at me, the person is critical. They're not even saying anything, right? And I have felt my thinking gets blocked, or I stop talking because I'm thinking that they will judge me, or they will. It's like in school giving marks, right? So there is a pressure to perform because when there is no appreciation. And the second thing that comes to me is I'm thinking of someone I know for almost 20 plus years. Even if it is a very difficult conversation, at multiple points of time, he will say, "It's okay. I think you're doing well." And I can tell you, he's one person with whom I just open my heart and talk about things. And some of the best thinking I have done in my life is with him. Yeah, what you said is true. What do you think?
I think what you're getting at is like one of the kind of the foundation stones of us being able to think well, to be able to trust each other, is that we need to feel safe. And I think when you were saying, like, you can tell just by somebody look how they're looking at you or how their body language is, like, we're so finely tuned to pick up on these kind of underlying messages that we're getting from each other, which are non-verbal. People don't need to speak, do they? It's just how they presence themselves, and from all those kind of cues we get a sense of, like, do I belong? Am I safe? Is it okay for me to bring myself into this conversation? And if at any point the answer is no, it will generate a slight stress response in our body. And you might not even notice it, but it kind of then causes us to kind of freeze or fight or flee. And so we're catapulted into this, as you say, like either performing or defending or conforming, so I'll just say what I think you want me to say. But it's like, that's just so not conducive to thinking. and it's not conducive to us flourishing and to us being able to explore and make mistakes and learn, you know. And so for me, appreciation is one of these foundational components of when it's not there, we don't feel safe and we don't feel like we belong. And therefore, we don't feel like we can contribute fully because we're always, as you say, sensing, am I being judged? Am I going to be criticized? And that takes up an enormous amount of our brain to kind of keep those two things going. And also, as you were speaking, it made me think about when I'm in an environment with somebody where over the, you know, the duration of that relationship, there has been kind of appreciation for who I am. What it then enables me to do is, it's like the assumptions I then make about you and me will generally be positive and liberating. So if you then say something to me which is quite challenging, my assumption will be, oh, this is interesting. Like Raja's trying to help me, or something's going on with Raja, or, you know, I'm not going to make assumptions which are like, well, Raja's awful, or he hates me, or I'm not good enough, because we've got a relationship which is based on what is good.
Mm.
Whereas if in every interaction I have with you, I get a sense of criticism, judgment, critique, when you then want to say something to me which maybe challenges me, that's probably going to elicit a much stronger stress response. And also probably not as good assumptions. I'm going to assume things about you and assume things about myself, which are probably untrue and limiting. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm remembering the whole big statement of positive philosophical choice. So what I'm seeing is, suppose I'm having a dialogue with a person, or I'm in a thinking environment. If in my heart and mind, if I am believing, or I'm believing that the other person is essentially good, they are capable, and they are enough. Even if I don't say, the way I look at them, actually, like the way we talk about, it's component is not about saying, component is about embodying, right? So the moment I have this component of appreciation in me, I think you said it very beautifully. I think it makes them feel valued, respected, and safe. I think, yeah. And I can think of all the people whom I felt comfortable with. There are times when I started as a consultant, I was only 25 and a half, and my colleagues were all 60s and 50s. But there were very specific few people with whom I will really, really feel wonderful about myself, because all they did is appreciated me and recognized me and accepted me for who I am.
Mm.
And whoever tried to show that, they are older, and I don't know, I'm just thinking, even the component of difference, the way we work with, seem to show some kind of appreciation for, it's okay, you are different, but I still respect you. I think that's something that I'm suddenly realizing. In some sense, we say, accept people as they are, okay? Which is very, very difficult thing, but that's exactly what makes someone become appreciative of the other person. Yeah. So what do you think, Sophie?
I think there was something that you said about, so obviously, like, the components are something that we embody, but I think this component is asking us to notice. So what it's kind of calling us to do is change our orientation from a more negative bias, which is what we all have, so we all have this kind of focus on what isn't working, because that's what generally keeps us safe. So we perceive threats as being more important than what is good. But what this component is doing is asking us to orientate ourselves to what we can see that is good already there, and then saying it. And it's to counterbalance this negativity bias, which is we don't have to work hard to have a negativity bias, but with appreciation we do have to work to notice and see and say things. And I think this gets to one of the real challenges with this component is it's not just to other people, Raja, that we need to be appreciating what is good. It's also to ourselves. And often the way we are with ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves, that internal narrative is very critical. You know, it's very harsh. And I think, you know, because a lot of people struggle with this component, you know, it's like they find it hard to receive, they find it hard to give. And I think it's because often we've got such a negativity kind of for ourselves that then noticing what is good in others almost doesn't feel authentic. And so there's this gap between, well, I kind of want to appreciate other people, but actually the way I'm being with myself isn't particularly appreciative. And so our own sort of sense of appreciation is quite low. And then being able to notice it in other people is quite low. Or we then don't have the words to say it because actually the words we're using for ourselves is quite hard. And when you were talking about when you were younger, like I think for most of us, there will be someone in our life who has embodied this at some point. It might not be a parent, it might be a teacher or a friend or a colleague. But there's almost someone who saw qualities in you or me almost before we did. So we were still sort of stuck in that kind of like perfectionistic imposter syndrome, not good enough. And actually there was somebody maybe just who actually could see all of that and also could see the qualities that we had. You know, so whether it was our diligence, our ability to problem solve, our you know, ability to synthesize information, our kindness to others, they could see that even when we couldn't. And I think what you were saying, it really reminded me of a time when, you know, like appreciation can really lift people up to who they already are when they can't yet see it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know. Even though I come from a culture where appreciation is not much. In India, we don't appreciate each other much, whether it's in personal life or professional life. I tend to do it even, I don't know, for a reasonably long time. So what I realized is exactly what you said, right? If I look back at, say from the age of 4, I always had people appreciating me more than criticizing me, including my parents, neighbors. Every school I went, at least 2-3 people were there who told me you are God's gift to mankind. I'm not joking. Sometimes I became a little arrogant because of that, but that gave me energy to go and do things I wouldn't have done if that was not there. So I pushed my boundaries in terms of thinking and action, just because even today, I think I have enough friends who will say, no, you are good or you have. So I think what you said is true. I think suddenly I'm wondering, it looks like appreciation is almost like a nourishment. It nourishes our soul. So we feel it's like, I can sit up like this the moment I get it. So what do you think?
I think appreciation is, like I was going back to that first question, is like, why does appreciation matter? And I think the point you just made kind of demonstrates that. Like without appreciation, we aren't going to take risks.
Mm.
We're not going to challenge ourselves. We're not going to put forward an idea that we think might be criticized. You know, we're not going to challenge the status quo. We're not going to be able to work collaboratively, actually, unless we've got this culture which says, I respect you as a person, even though we might disagree. You know, and I think it's like that. It gets to the point of like appreciation. What we're doing is appreciating the qualities that people embody. You know, it's different than recognition. So recognition is for a task, you know, or something you've done well. It's kind of conditioned on something. Whereas when we're appreciating people, it's really kind of going underneath that and saying, I see you as a person. And because of that, like that strong foundation of whether it's you then see yourself as capable or dependable or reliable or you know, any of those things, it's like you can then transfer those qualities to whatever you're doing. So if somebody appreciates my kindness, it might be in a specific event, but if I then can see myself as kind, I'm going to generalize that over my life, not just in one circumstance. And so I think it's like it's this, when you were talking, it's like a multiplier. Appreciation is, it's like we're kind of amplifying what is good, so someone can then use that maybe when things aren't as good. You know, it's got something to fall back on. And I think it makes us like, what's the I can't remember I remember the person because Nancy referred to him, but it's like anti-fragile. You know, I think when we have this context within ourselves, I think it really allows us to be with each other in a way that's much more authentic, to be able to almost say, I don't know, you know, to admit the things we're not so good at because I'm not so fragile, you know. And also when you were talking, it made me appreciate afresh, like just how important this is for children. Because children need appreciation to grow and to thrive and to flourish. And actually, I don't think we're any different as adults. You know, I think we've just learned to get by without it. So when you were talking about the soil, the nourishment, it's almost like as adults, we've learned how to grow on maybe not such good. Whereas, like, yeah, the appreciation kind of can act as a grower, a compost, you know. But it's highlighting what is already there, you know. And I think that's the thing. Like, we're not making something up. We're noticing what is already good. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know what you talked about children. I'm just remembering an instant with my son. He's now 22, but he was maybe five and a half. So I remember I used to work with him mostly in math. So we were doing something, and then he said suddenly, he doesn't probably even know the word math. Okay? So he says, I'm good with numbers. Okay. So I asked him, what about language? Because his thinking language is English. So he said, no, I'm not. Okay. So very interestingly, what I realized is whenever he did math, even if he did a mistake, I will never say what you did is wrong. I'll say, okay, this is what you did. Can we try to do it differently? And when he did well, I will actually appreciate his ability to think differently or his ability to work with his fingers, whatever, right? So it's very interesting how the child really grasps. At the same time, I remember recently I did a thinking session, couple of thinking sessions with my son. One of the things I have seen recently is when I appreciate a quality, he will just, he'll dismiss. Okay. But the way he says, I know he has taken it. But the most interesting thing I saw is when I did the thinking session with him, actually he accepted it. So I think there is also, I think children, as well as when I'm talking about it, I'm also realizing in my culture, I don't know about yours, even receiving appreciation seems to be a challenge. What do you think?
So I think it is a challenge for people. But I mean, it takes about 10 seconds. So in order for an appreciation to kind of get absorbed, it takes about 10 seconds for us to kind of hear it and allow it to settle. And I think what most people do when they're appreciated is almost just bat it straight back. So it's like, instead of absorbing it and saying, actually, that's what somebody's seen in me, we're instantly kind of, oh no, oh really? No, I don't think so. You know, we're minimizing it, or we're, you know, kind of countering it with something. But I think for me, it goes back to, why is it so hard for people to absorb appreciation? You know, I think often we've grown up in not just in a family context, in a societal context, which prioritizes what isn't good. And that's why then it can feel like inauthentic or insincere. You know, and we talk about, you know, in order for appreciation to land, it needs to be sincere, it needs to be specific, and it needs to be succinct. So sincere, specific, and succinct. And so I think sometimes we're not specific enough when we're appreciating. So we might say a quality and then we add on a lot of information, you know, and it's too much. We can't absorb it. We just need, it's like, I really appreciate your diligence. I really appreciate how thoughtful you were when you set the table, whatever it is. And that's it. And it's like, it's a one sentence thing. And I think sometimes the way we give an appreciation makes it hard to absorb. So we're having to fight for what was the quality, or what was it. And also I think it's sometimes because we're not appreciative of ourselves, it's almost like, going back to your analogy of the land, you know, when land is parched, when it's really dry and it rains, what happens to begin with is the rain just rains off. It doesn't get absorbed. And so I think it's just these little drops, you know, it's like, sometimes it can be too much. And so it's just, you know, and also for some people, receiving appreciation verbally won't land for them. That's not their style, you know. So sometimes I think we have to think more, could I write a note? Is it a different way of appreciating? So is my presence, my listening, my being with you, can that be an act of appreciation? You know, some people will feel appreciated if you you know, have got them a little thoughtful gift, you know, that's shown something. So I think we have to think about different ways that we can appreciate, Raja, so that it can land. But one of the practices we talk about with children, especially if you have children, but you can do this for, like, whether it's your team, you know, people in your team, is when you're not with them, think about some qualities that you appreciate in them. So you might start with, like, maybe just start with 2 or 3 qualities that you know. So if I'm coming on a call with you and I just picture Raja, I think, what is it actually really value in him that's not dependent on anything you're doing or saying? And then I've got that. And then what I'm looking for or noticing is opportunities to share that with you. But I'm not kind of having to think about what I appreciate at the same time. But what we encourage with children is, for each year of their life, choose another quality. So I think for my children are 8 and 10 at the moment, but I think about, so what's a quality I really want to appreciate in them now? But the idea being, by the time they leave home at 17 or 18 or whenever they leave, they've really had embedded 18 qualities that I've really appreciated in them. But it doesn't feel overwhelming because I've just added one a year. What do you think?
It is very fascinating what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting to look at, appreciate one quality consistently over a year. Yeah, it's a beautiful. Yeah, it's like you said, if when it rains very heavy, it won't go into the land. But when it slow rain, consistent rain, it goes in. So I think it is about, yeah, consistency as well as, yeah, it's very interesting. I think it looks very, very interesting. I don't know. Maybe once, like I'm thinking that sometimes reinforcing the same appreciation again and again also helps the person to absorb it far more strongly. I think that's something that came to me very, very interestingly, because we do multiple things. And sometimes when we appreciate, we say, I appreciated last time the same thing. Why should I appreciate it again the same thing? But I'm realizing how repeating the same appreciation can also help them to absorb it more.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's quite a interesting thought. Yeah. So I was just thinking about this. I think you might know, right?
Yeah.
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 So when I did workshops, I kind of spread the whole thing on a table, because at least in India, people, first of all, English is not our native language, but just to pick up positive quality, the words for positive quality, people struggle. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, so just going back to your other point about, is it repeating? So having the context is different each time. And so I think it's like that saying about we never step into the same river twice, because even if I appreciated something in you today, that's in this context, from this conversation. And then I might see you again in another few months, and you and I are slightly different, and the context will be slightly different. And so I think it's the way we say it, and what we say will be slightly different, which is what keeps it kind of sincere. But in terms of it, I think we do really struggle with a language of qualities. I think we struggle with a language for lots of things. So whether it's feelings, emotions, sensations, anything that's kind of internal, it's really hard. And so I think we do have to have a practice of looking for them. So whether it is, like on my website, I've got a list of 300 qualities that we can link to it, Raja. Because I just think in the moment, actually really kind of trying to bring up a quality can be really hard. And it can take our attention away from the conversation or what we're doing. And so if I'm in a thinking session or when I do coaching, as part of my kind of preparing for that session, I will choose a quality that I appreciate in the person I'm about to work with before I get on the call. And then I might not use that appreciation, but I know I've already got a kind of a word or something I've already brought to mind about that person. And I think again, we've just got to start where we are. So we might have certain qualities that we feel really comfortable with, and it's just building that up. But I think we have to build that up, not in the moment. And so again, if I'm running a team, I want to be thinking about my team when they're not there and thinking about actually what is it I really value and appreciate. And then I might have my list with me. But we've got to kind of build that language. Otherwise we end up just saying, oh, like, I think you're really nice. Like, it doesn't mean anything. It's like, specifically, what's the quality I've noticed? And and I think that does take work. Yeah. But it's nice work. Like when you were talking earlier, I was like going back to that question, like, why does appreciation matter? It's like, it feels good. Like it feels good to notice what is good in people. It feels good to identify these qualities in each other and also to identify them in myself. Like it feels good.
Yeah.
What are your freshest thoughts?
So two things are coming to me listening to you. One, I think, is like I have been going for somatic experience therapy. So they talk about body vocabulary. Okay. So sometimes, since, like, for example, I have not focused on my body, then I can't even articulate what my body sensation is. So I think what you said is true. Like in India, when there are times I came from T group kind of background. Okay. So there will be a question like, what do you feel or how do you feel? And most of the time response would be something about thought. So sometimes to even so what is coming to me is, I don't know, if I do not appreciate myself, I cannot appreciate anyone else. So also I'm seeing whenever I'm in a positive state and I'm appreciating myself, then the amount of appreciation I give to the world is also higher. But if I am in a place where I am actually self-beating myself, then that amount of appreciation I give it back to the world is also low. So that's something that is coming to me very, very interestingly. What do you think? So,
I mean, I think it to me as well goes back to the component of attention. You know, what am I choosing to place my attention on? Like for me to appreciate you sincerely, I've got to be paying attention to you. I've got to see you. And I think sometimes, yes, we lack a language and we're not doing it ourselves, but I think sometimes we're just so distracted and we're so busy and we're so kind of on this treadmill of doing and task and getting things done that actually we're not paying enough attention to be able to notice, you know. And so whether that's for ourselves or for somebody else, it's almost like we get to the end of the day and it's like, actually I haven't noticed anything that's good. I haven't actually noticed anything good or bad. But if we don't kind of actively pay attention to what is good, our negativity bias will focus on what's bad. You know, so we'll go home and we'll ruminate over the conversation that didn't go quite as well, or the task we didn't get done at work, or the slight look someone gave us. Like we'll worry about that. And actually, I think what appreciation is asking us to do is to counterbalance that bias. But I think it asks us to really think about like what is most important, you know, and what am I choosing to place my finite attention on? And is that what I want? So do I want to go through my days so focused on my tasks that I miss all of the good? And it's like, do I? I don't, you know, but it's hard. You know, I've got to bring my attention back. I've got to, and I'm no exception. You know, it's not like I'm busy. You know, I've got 2 young children. I work, and it's like the days can just go by in a blur, Roger, and the weeks can. And I think this component, and we talk about the components are a practice. Like this component as a practice is saying, what do I want to notice today? And where can I notice what is good? As well as get everything done. You know, can I practice this? What do you think?
I think it is a beautiful way to end.
Do I get to appreciate you now?
Yeah.
I get to do that piece now.
Yeah.
The quality I really appreciate in you, Raja, is it's like it's like the word comes is embrace. Like you have this warmth that feels like an embrace all the way from India, but it's the quality of reaching out. So you have a warmth, but it's the way you reach out and embrace with that warmth that I really want to appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. So the quality I want to appreciate is the quality of balance between philosophical esoteric part to practical part. I think that's a beautiful balance that I noticed in you. So that's something I want to appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.